Hi guys, I'm Luna. Welcome to Printmaking 101, the series, the mini course. I'm very excited to have you guys here. Hopefully you're looking forward to creating your first stamp, or maybe you've done this before and you want a refresher, but all together, just very excited to have you here. One of the things I want to start with is kind of just my background on printmaking. So I actually started doing printmaking back in middle school. I just came to this realization recently, but I got my first block printing set when I was about 12 or so in middle school from my dad as a birthday gift. And it was such a cool experience because it was something I hadn't really heard about before, but having been exposed to it so young, I was very excited to learn more about it. And then after that, I was actually able to take a course in high school, which was really dedicated to printmaking as a whole. So we learned all the different kinds of styles, and it was really interesting to learn that there wasn't just one type of printmaking, but several different types. So we learned solar plates, we also learned screen printing, and things of that sort. So fast forward over my adult years, I kind of worked on doing some little courses here and there, kind of learning things in workshops. I also just did one recently in New York City, focusing on printmaking and kind of honing in on that craft. And it was very fascinating to learn that there's still so much to learn in printmaking. But given all that experience that I had, I really wanted to put together this mini course for people who maybe are new to printmaking and want to learn a bit more. This is going to be perfect for you. Now, I want to jump in a little bit about the history of printmaking. Printmaking actually has its origins in China about several thousand years ago that, since then has been able to be shared across the world. So you've seen Japan do a lot of screen printing as well as other very famous places around the world. So given that, I'm really excited to share the craft with you to kind of keep the art form alive since it has been around for so long. And very, very cool that we are able to do this even now. And, back in the day, they did a lot of wood block printing, which is still relevant today, but what's nice is that we have other mediums and other types of blocks that make it a bit easier on us to create multiple stamps. So with that, I kind of want to just give a broad overview of what to expect for the course. The course is going to be broken down into about a few modules, and so we're going to first start with the materials and uses. So the materials I'll go over in the next module, but I actually recommend a specific kit for us to work with because it gives you all the essentials for printmaking and it doesn't cost very much money, and you can find it on Amazon too. So I'll make sure to give you a link for that. And then we're going to talk about the different uses for the materials that are provided. After that, we're going to go over safety and concepts. We are going to be carving, so that means we're going to have sharp instruments, and we want to make sure that we're careful with ourselves and then anyone else who's maybe around us or taking this course with you. Now we'll also jump into the concepts around printmaking to make sure the design is what you're imagining and just the different theories behind it. Then after that, we're going to jump into the design portions where we're going to be breaking down what kind of design you're going to want to put together. It can be a little bit overwhelming to decide what design you want to draw up and put on your stamp, but just as a note, this is only one stamp and you can make numerous stamps. And nowadays, since we have things like the rubber block, it's a bit easier to create several instead of just stick to one. So just keep that in mind. This is just one of potentially many that you'll create with printmaking. After that, we're going to talk about adding your design to the stamp itself so that it's something that we can start carving out. We'll then jump into carving, the different techniques and tips that I have recommended for, carving your stamp there. And then we're going to talk about testing your stamp. This is a really important one because sometimes when you carve the stamp, you actually don't get the actual kind of design that you want to, portray. And so this is a really nice way to test and iterate and see what else we need to carve and kind of change. After that, we'll talk a bit about where we want to put the design. What's really amazing about printmaking, something that has really drawn me since the very beginning, is that you can actually put the print on several different surfaces, so we'll go into depth in that module. Now, with all of that being said, I wanted to just kind of give you a preview what to expect these prints to potentially look like. We are going to be working on a little bit of a smaller print or stamp rather, so just to keep that in mind. But this is about half of the block that we'll be working with. This is something that I cut, so it's nice about rubber. But as an example, here's a stamp that I did. I've been really into aquatic things, so that was a shell. And then this is a squid that I've been working on. And then just to give you a quick overview and look at what it can look like, this is a print of that squid. And what's really nice about this is that obviously you can do different colors and different iterations. It's truly endless with printmaking, which makes it so exciting. So go ahead and jump into the next module. See you there. Hi guys, welcome to the next module. We're going to be talking about the materials and the different uses for the things that the kit comes with. So the first thing I want to mention is the kit itself. It is called a Speedball Speedy Carve Toolkit, and it comes with a few things that we're going to need. Well, mostly all the things we're going to need. So with that, I'm going to go over all the things that it comes with. So it comes with a rubber block. A rubber block is really, really nice because it comes with one that's about this size, but you can cut the rubber block, so keep that in the back of your mind. The other thing that it comes with is going to be paper. This is very important for transferring your design to the rubber block itself, and we'll go into depth later on when we're doing that. And then it also comes with the carving tool, which is this guy, and it comes with two attachments, so different sizes depending on what you're trying to accomplish with your stamp. But what's really nice is that it has a little insert section here where you can just put it in carefully because it is sharp. But that's what it comes with, and it comes with this attachment as well, a little different size. Now, just to briefly go over the things and how we're going to use them. This is obviously going to be for the stamp itself. We have the transfer paper. We've got this tool. One of the things I'll kind of iterate later on in the course and a few times is how to use it so that you're safe with it. A lot of the time we'll have the design on the stamp. We'll be probably placing it on the table with our hand like this. And since it's sharp, sometimes we need to be really mindful of the direction that we're putting it. So sometimes we'll be carving and we'll be going in the direction of our hand, and it can get kind of dangerous there, especially if you're doing it really hard. So make sure that you have your hand out of the way, and anyone else around you, make sure you're not pointing it in their direction. So that's the number one tip for carving that we'll keep in mind, but I'll make sure to mention it again when we start diving in and carving the stamp itself. But that's what it comes with. Now I will note, you will need one more thing for the course that does not come in the Speedy Carve Toolkit, and that is ink. Now ink comes in many different forms and different types because it depends on the surface you're going to be printing on. I have been printing on paper, so I have something simple. It's a washable ink pad. You can find this on Amazon, you can find it at Michael's, but I'll leave a link in the description as well so that you have access to that. But this is the color I've been using lately. It's just a color that I've been drawn to, so make sure to pick a color that you're interested in as well. And with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next module. See you there. Hello, welcome to the next module of this course. We're going to be talking briefly about safety and concepts. Just to reiterate again, we are dealing with sharp objects, so just make sure to keep that in mind when we are carving later on in the course. But with that, we're going to jump into the concepts. So when it comes to printmaking, there are a couple things to consider when you are designing your specific stamp. So over here, I'm going to show you a few things. One of the things that you want to keep in mind is the space that you're taking in the design. So as you can see where I carved out the design here. So that's going to be the negative space. This is something that is not going to show up in the design. And just to show you side by side, this is where I've carved all the white space, does not have ink on it. That is negative space. Now what the positive space is what the ink exists on. So think of it as the ink lives on the positive space, that's what you want to show up, whereas the negative space is what you, quote, don't want to show up. So make sure to keep that in mind. And as you'll notice, this is also kind of the opposite of what you see on here, and that is because you flip it and you stamp it that way. So that comes into consideration when we're talking about the design and how we bring it all together and put it on the stamp. So that's key, is you want to make sure you have positive and negative considered. Now the other thing I will note, if this is something that is new to you, it's nice to keep the stamp pretty simple on the first get-go, since it can get a little bit confusing in terms of the positive and negative space. Now, for example, if you wanted this squid to look a bit different, and you wanted to reverse the positive and negative space, then that means you would want to make sure you carve all of this blue space if you want that to show up white. And same goes if you want the lines to show up as blue, you want to make sure that you don't carve that out so that it ends up as positive space. So those are the couple of concepts you want to keep in mind when you're thinking about your design. Okay, now let's jump into design and trying to decide what you want to create for your stamp. I'm going to show you a few examples of pretty simple designs that you want to consider when deciding what you want for your stamp. So the first one is a snail that I created a little bit ago, and it was so fun to create. Obviously it's very tiny. It's very similar to this size block, very tiny, but it's very portable and you can put it anywhere you want. But just to show you all the different ways I was playing around with the idea, you can see that this is the paper I used. You can see all the different ways I was kind of trying to say, oh, what do I want this snail to look like? And then all the different times I kind of used the different inks and stuff. Now, I also want to show you something very, very simple. And what's really nice about printmaking is that you can do pattern designs that you can reuse over and over again. So this is going to be a bit more abstract. But again, this is something you can play around with. If you want like a repeatable pattern, you can do something like this, a bit more abstract, and you can do whatever you want there. And just to show you, these are kind of like the different iterations I did of playing around with what do I want it to look like, how did it come out, if there's any way I can make it a little bit more of what I want. Now jumping into another one, I played a lot with the idea of a wave. And so you can see this is my first design of that. This is kind of a different one, a bit more simpler. Sometimes going simpler is really nice to do. And then you can see how it came to life. Again, color plays a huge part in this. And luckily at this point, I was able to access different ones. So you can see how it's like a green tint, kind of teal blue, and then the moon here. And again, just very simple there as well. But kind of playing around with those designs. Very simple for these, but something to keep in mind. Here are the snails that I've made so many times that you can just print and go. Okay, and then just to show you a different one, here's another stamp that I created. Kind of have an aquatic theme again. All this positive space. That's really great to have when you're creating a stamp. And with that, let's go ahead and move to the next module. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and talk about the design and adding it to your stamp. So once you get an idea of what you want your design to look like, we have to make sure that we have our materials prepped. So for example, I ended up cutting my block into something pretty small. You can make it a different size. You can keep it pretty big like this. Whatever you're thinking about works well. But for now, I'm going to be working on something small since I really like its portability. Now the next thing you want to introduce is your paper. So your paper is going to be the tool in which helps you add your design to the stamp. And so to get that ready, we're going to want to make sure that we have this cut in the right size. So I'm just going to make some marks and cut it real quick. You can follow along, of course, but it doesn't have to be perfect, but just have that in a good spot so that you can place it on here. There you go. So now that we have the paper ready, we have the rubber block ready, we can start playing with our design. So I already started kind of playing with mine. Just using a piece of paper and some pencil, so make sure you have that as well when you're creating your design and kind of sketching. I did something very simple, just a little acorn, and what I ended up doing was tracing that block size. Obviously you can kind of freeform it, but to make sure you have that boundary and you don't create a design bigger than your stamp, you can go ahead and trace your stamp there like I did. And then you're going to want to put your design in there. Again, kind of thinking about when you're drawing this out, what do you want the ink to show and what do you want the ink not to be on, right? So for example, in this design, I've got the lines, right? So the question is, do I want the lines to be my ink color, or do I want this white space to be my ink color? Make sure you think about that. I think for me, I'm gonna go ahead and tell myself that I want it to just be an outline. So I kind of want it to look just as it is, where all of this is carved out, all of this is carved out, this is carved out, this has no ink, this has no ink. And it's just a very simple outline. So when you've made that decision, you want to kind of clarify that for yourself. So for me, what helps is I kind of scratch out what I don't want to have the ink on. So this is something that I'm gonna carve out, right? This is not gonna have ink. So I'm giving myself a little note here. Make sure to carve this out, Luna, when you're carving. And make sure to also carve this out as well. And maybe after some time thinking about it, I actually kind of want this to show up, right? So for me, I want to make sure that I have these guys inked. So I do not want to carve these, but I do want to carve the surrounding area, right? So just kind of making some kind of note to yourself of, I want to carve that. So just to reiterate, these lines, I'm not carving, but I am carving everything around it so that when I put ink on the block, this line shows up because it is positive space. I did not carve it out. Same with these lines, and then same with these little V's here for the acorn hat. I am not gonna carve these out. These are gonna have ink on it, but I'm gonna carve around it. Okay, so with that being said, you're gonna go ahead and put your paper on top. Now there are two sides. There's one that's more soft, and then there's one that's a bit more dull. I tend to put the dull side on the the back, so the shiny's on top and then the dull's on the back. And what you're gonna just do is to transfer it onto your paper so that you can then transfer it to your block. You're just gonna kind of trace your design. And what's gonna happen, just to kind of show you, is that it's gonna show up on this. And what's good is that obviously it's gonna show up on this side, but it's also gonna leave an imprint on the back. So just kind of carry on, and you're gonna go around your design. It doesn't have to be perfect because the design already exists. You don't have to make it exactly that way, but make sure you're just kind of doing the design you want. Kind of keep that moving along, and add in the little hatches all the way. Again, I kept this design very simple. You can do something a bit more involved. Maybe in a later course we can do that. But for now, we're doing it simple. A little acorn. So after that, you're done. And notice I didn't mark out the other hatches that I've made of kind of the mental note of what I don't want to show up, but just the design itself. So see how it's already exists on there. And so when you have that, you're gonna go ahead and think about it, right? So if you want the stamp to show up like this, and the way stamps work is that you have an image here and you flip it to stamp, then you want to make sure that when you put this design on it, you flip it as well, right? So that when you bring it, when the stamp exists on there, you can flip it and then it'll be that orientation. Now obviously you can keep it the other orientation if you want it to be the opposite of this, but if you want it to look exactly like your design, that's what you gotta keep in mind. Okay, so now we have the design on the paper, and now we can add it. We can add it to our stamp. So again, very simple. We already have the design on the paper, and we're gonna do the same thing. We're just gonna kind of trace. And what will happen is that you're gonna leave a little mark on that stamp. Quite magical. And you're just gonna keep doing that until you have the whole design on your stamp. Pretty simple here, just like that. Gonna leave some marks for these guys. All the way. And there we go. We should have our little acorn. So that was kind of a few steps there in the process. We got the size of our stamp. We made sure we cut the piece of paper to the size of our stamp. We also made sure that our design was the size of the stamp. Created the design, kind of decided what we wanted to carve out, what we didn't. We added the design to our paper, or rather to our stamp, and now it's ready to go. So in the next module, we're going to go ahead and start carving this stamp.